So actually, you have a low carbon fuel standard, you figure out how to define that, and then you say, period, in this economy, in the United States, what you sell has to meet at least this.
Has to have this much, reductions from regular, baseline petroleum.
And ramp that down over time.
And then ramp that down over time.
That's not in place today at either level, federal or state, and that's not part of how is
California is working on it, but they've still got quite a ways to go in figuring out how to measure life cycle emissions. That's where some of the big debate has come about, do you include the indirect land costs? Do you, can you calculate how much land is taken out of crop production in the U.S. and then what effect that has in other countries in terms of deforestation to use land there to produce the crops that aren't being produced here. And so there have been arguments among people in California and across the U.S. and in the EU, because they saw some pretty bad results when they set some targets that hadn't even been put into effect legally, but they saw some pretty massive deforestation in Indonesia. And so the question is, how do we calculate that? Are we able to make the same types of calculations for petroleum fuels in terms of what are their full life cycle costs? What would we need to look at that would be similar to that situation in the biofuels industry? So because we can't just look at one piece of the life cycle emissions, we've got to look at life cycle emissions for every type of fuel. So what a low carbon fuel standard does is it tries to take that into account. And because of that, and because of the complexities of that, it's taken California quite a while to come up with the methods for calculating it. They have been using a model that was created by one of the national labs, and they've been trying to figure out now how to put in the indirect impacts from land use into that model, but there's still a ways to go on that. And that's one of the reasons that, we certainly share some of Jonathan Lewis's concerns from the Clean Air Task Force. We do want to make sure that, for example, corn ethanol, and I think John agrees with this, is not your best bet with biofuels. In fact, in some studies, it's been shown to actually increase greenhouse gas emissions depending on what the process is that's used to create it. And so, while we would prefer not to see any mandates at this point because we think that the science hasn't caught up in terms of calculating the percentages, the idea that they're at least tied to these percentages, that we're making this effort to do it, and that we're on the road to this low carbon fuel standard, that we're going to be looking to California and to EPA as they figure out how to solve this life cycle emissions problem, is something that looks to us much more promising than the original bill, which didn't have these specific percentage reductions.